Hello everyone, it's Skyee here and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're visiting. Today we're going to be doing a skin tutorial, and I would actually kind of like to start doing a skin series. So I've got my combinations book here, which I know a lot of you guys ask me when I'll have that video up. I promise I will get there. It's just a little bit chaotic. I desperately need to start setting aside some time to add combinations to it because I haven't really added to it since my last video, so I would like to update this before doing an update video because otherwise it doesn't really make sense. I could just point you in the direction of the most recent video. I have lots of combinations saved on my phone and stuff, I just have yet to put them in here. So yeah, the skin tutorial that I have up right now, if we're counting just tutorials, I mean, technically you could look at any color along of mine as a skin tutorial because I always talk about what I'm doing and go in depth on what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, that kind of thing. But I would like to have a video just focused on skin, and I'm pretty sure that the last skin tutorial I did was back when I was still using my Prismacolor Scholars. So I would definitely like to update that now because I've come a long way since then. I use the Prismacolor Premieres, which not so much that the pencil makes a huge difference. It kind of does, I'm not gonna lie, but it makes it a little bit easier for sure. And then my technique, I believe, is a little bit different, and the results I can achieve are definitely way different. So yeah, I would like to update that. I would actually like to do a skin series based on some of the skin tones I have in here. So there's a few that I would want to do. I don't know if I would do a video on every single one of these skin tones, but I figure for challenges, I usually use like the smaller size books, like the pocket size books, like Sweet and Simple and Enchanted Faces, and soon Fierce and Fancy Faces. So anytime I'm coloring a page for challenges, I'll try and choose a different skin tone maybe and record the process of it. So there's actually two challenges I want to do. I'm going to record the first one right now, and that's going to be using kind of the usual skin tone that we use for color along. So we're going to be using this one here. This is my generic skin tone. It's my go-to. I love this one. I always return back to it. So we're going to be using that one today. So I'm going to keep the skin in real time, go over everything with you. So those of you that want to use this as a tutorial, you can. And then I will probably also film the rest of the picture just to have like a speed color attached to it. We'll kind of see whether it's attached to this video or if it's separate. I'm not quite sure yet, but either way, there will be a skin tutorial part and then a speed color part, whether it's combined or not. There will be both of those. So I'm going to be coloring in Sweet and Simple Whimsy Girls, and the page that I'm going to be coloring is Frosted Rose. So I'm doing this for a Disney Princess challenge. I'm going to color her as Belle, and yeah, we're going to start on the skin and we'll go from there. All right, so I got a piece of paper in behind her. I've used I think these are called butterfly clips. I'm really not sure, but anyway, I used this clip to kind of weight down the page because it's kind of at the back of the book, so it kept wanting to close, so that'll kind of help. And then let's go ahead and get started. So like I said, I'm going to be doing her as Belle, so I'm actually just going to pull up a picture for reference here. Not so much that I need a reference for the skin, but I do want to add some eye makeup to her, so I'll include that in this, of course. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my light peach and I'm just going to do a light base over all of her skin. So just doing some large circles, using really light pressure and just lightly going over all of her skin. Now you don't necessarily have to use this page and follow along per se. You can apply these techniques to any page that you're working on. And I definitely challenge you to do so, because the more you do that, the more you'll grow. Not all pages are going to be the same. There's going to be some differences. There's going to be some variances, like depending on where you want your shadows and your highlights to be. And that's kind of like another lesson on its own, and I'm not the best at explaining it, but I will definitely try. I'm not quite sure where I want my light source yet. I haven't quite decided that, but I'll probably have to soon. I can't really tell in this image if she's like wearing, I think she's wearing like a shirt with like a sash, and then these are her pants here. Or is this more skin? I don't really know. I want to kind of color it as a full dress, I think, so I'm just going to leave that kind of as is. Okay, so now I'm actually going to go in with my darkest color. I highly recommend working with sharp pencils because it definitely helps. Okay, mine's not the sharpest, but it's not really cooperating. So with the Parma Violet, I'm just gonna lightly start picking out my shadows. And so I kind of like to go under the eyebrows because I like to create a little bit of a shadow, because our eyebrows are kind of just like on the top of our eye sockets. Our eyes kind of like sink in a little bit, so there's a little bit of a shadow here. I'm gonna add a little bit of a shadow coming around her face. I added a little bit too much up here because my pencil is kind of funny and I turned it the wrong way. It's still kind of broken, so a little bit of an accident there. I definitely would not have put that much, but we can fix it. It's not the end of the world. We're using really light pressures. We can always blend it out later. It should be fine. So I'm basically just adding an outline to her face and then just fading out the shadows from there. I want to make her lips look full, so I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow in underneath them. I'm going to add a little bit of a Cupid's bow on her nose here. And then I actually like to add noses to the girls. So for her, I think I'm going to bring her nose up a little bit, give it a little point, and then I like to kind of fade the noses, kind of like curving off almost towards this line of their eyes. I don't like to bring them quite up as far as their eyebrows because to me that just looks a little bit funny and I don't really like that. I like it better when it kind of levels up here. It looks a little bit better in my opinion. So I want her nose to be a little bit pointed. And then I'm just going to fade it up slightly, just like that. I'm going to add a fair bit more of this color to her neck because her neck is going to be in shadow because of her hair. And this is kind of what I mean where every picture is going to be a little bit different. The techniques are relatively the same, but your shadows are going to be different. So I'm going to add shadows underneath the leaves. I'm going to add shadows underneath the strands of hair that are kind of cascading over her chest here. Okay, so now because of the way I have her nose, that's going to be my deciding factor on where the light is coming from. So I could have had her nose turned like this. I don't normally do that. I don't know if it's because I'm right-handed or what, but usually if their faces are straight on, I always put the nose kind of coming out towards the left. I'm not sure why. I should maybe do a right-sided nose one time to see what that looks like. But anyways, with her nose being pointed this way, I'm gonna have the shadow on the left side, which means that our light source is kind of coming in from the right. So you just kind of gotta imagine that there's light coming in this way. Her hair is gonna be in the way, so it's gonna create a deeper shadow here. So we're gonna have a deeper shadow here. It's gonna be still shadowed on this side, but not too much. Underneath her hair, of course, is gonna be shadowed. I messed up here. Any parts of her skin that's kind of exposed on this side is going to be light. We'll add a little bit of a shadow underneath the hair strand here, and then the shadows are going to kind of come out from where she has her arm tucked behind her body. So always just light, small circles. You want to really build up those layers. It's really going to help you get some dimension to your skin. And then also, especially with the Parma Violet, because it's not really a skin color, it's more of an undertone. It's going to give her like a cool looking shadow undertone to her skin. And we're going to kind of neutralize that with the nectar later on. So this part is where I get like a little bit confused, because technically with our light source coming from here, she's going to have shadows all along this side of her arm. But then she's also going to have shadows on this side because there's no light over here, right? It's going to be darker. So I will usually just put shadows on both and hope for the best. I find that 9 times out of 10, your shadows don't necessarily have to make sense. Unless somebody's really analyzing your picture, they're not going to notice that your shadows are a little bit off. But if you have shadows in general, whether they're right or wrong, it's going to add that extra element to your picture. It's just going to look, it's just going to have a lot more character, I suppose. It won't look as flat. So while it's definitely a good idea to kind of really think about where you're placing your shadows, because it's good for practice, don't overthink it and overanalyze. I will sometimes have shadows where there technically wouldn't be shadows just because I know that it'll make the picture look better. But for the most part, this arm is going to be quite a bit in shadow, so I'm totally okay with having a lot of the Parma Violet here. That's totally fine. Let's see, light source coming from here. I technically put shadows on the wrong side of the hair. See, even I mess up a little bit, but I'm just going to add some shadows to this side of her hair as well. My light is kind of coming down at an angle, I think, so there could be shadows on both sides. Why not? I don't think there'd be shadow here, so still just underneath this one is good. Just gonna add a slight little bit more shadow coming off of her nose here, just a little bit. So here she's already starting to look a little bit more dimensional, and we've hardly even done anything yet. So now we're gonna come in with our next color, which is the Nectar. I think I'm pretty happy with where the shadows are. We can always deepen them up a little bit later, but we're just gonna start going in with the Nectar just over top of that Parma Violet and fading this out. So I kind of used the Nectar and the Parma Violet together. I class them as one color. So I wouldn't really bring the Nectar out too far on its own. I don't feel like we really need to. I feel like I use the Nectar just to turn the Parma Violet into more of like a skin tone looking color. You can bring the Nectar out on its own a little bit if you choose to, but I find that sometimes I have a hard time fitting all of the colors in normally anyways, and I feel like whether I bring the Parma Violet out further or just use it over top of the Parma Violet, it doesn't really make too much of a difference that I notice, so I feel like less is more in this case. But coloring and practice is always based on experimenting. If you're not experimenting, then you're not going to learn anything new, right? So I watch a lot of videos of YouTubers kind of coloring characters and stuff, mostly with markers because I just love the way that it looks. Although I'm not like a huge marker colorist myself, I'm dabbling in that now, but still kind of learning. But yeah, I love to watch them create characters and color them. And I will definitely pay attention to where their shadows are, where their highlights are. My biggest problem, I think, is adding too much shadow, so I've been trying to work on that. I kind of let my shadows take over the page, and then I kind of lose my highlights in there, and then there's just not as much contrast, which definitely can make or break a page. It's still going to look pretty good, but it would look better with some good shadows, or some good highlights, sorry. So I've been working on that. It's always a learning thing. There's always stuff that you can learn, always stuff that you can improve. I don't feel like we're ever fully done learning. There's still so many techniques and different things that I want to try out and learn. I'm gonna go a little bit extra light on her face because I want to add blush and eye makeup. I really don't want to burnish anything, so I want to be really careful with the amount of pressure I'm using. I do want to build up a good skin tone base to put the makeup on top of, that way it doesn't end up looking clowny. I find I used to just do like makeup on their faces and then do the skin separately. And I find that usually the makeup looks a little bit too bright and bold. It looks out of place. I like to make it appear a little bit more natural, so I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a skin color to kind of build the makeup on top of. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm mostly focusing on like building up the skin color around her eyelids and cheeks. And then just kind of working on everything else as well while we're doing that, because we might as well. Can add just like a little slight line here, just to indicate the other side of her nose. I only ever do just a little slight line and that's it. I leave it real simple like that. So we have the curve of her nose, which you can always keep it down more. You can make it more rounded. You can make it pointy. You can definitely play around with that. I would invest in tracing paper. That is probably like the best advice I could give you. If you want to play around with adding noses and stuff, get some tracing paper and then just put it over your page and then practice just drawing in different noses. Kind of see how it works, how the different shapes of noses play about, and then you can kind of go from there and get some practice without committing it to your page. I used to play around with tracing paper quite a bit, and I still do if I can't figure out color choices. I find it really helpful. It's not the best because it still like adds a foggy look to your page, so you can't like clearly see what it would look like, but it gives you a general idea to kind of build off of. I feel like it gives you enough information to make a decision on which choice you want to go with. Okay, I think that's probably good for the nectar. Let's go in with our peach. I'm mostly just going to focus on her face now. So with the peach, I'm just going to bring this in over top of everything again, still really light, and I'm just going to fade this out a little bit. So just fading this out from everywhere that I've put shadows. leaving a little bit of highlight here and there for our light peach, which will be one of our lightest colors. And then we can also go over top of everything when it's done and burnish with the white if you want to like pale the skin a little bit more, if you want really, really fair skin. Okay, I think this should be a good enough base. I can start throwing my colors in. So I'm just going to start with the eye makeup. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to, but I figured I would include it since it's not very often that I do makeup on the girls. So it might be good to include some in these skin tutorial series. I don't know if I need a new pencil sharpener or what. I feel like either my pencils are not good or this thing is just eating them. Come on, get out of there. Okay, so I picked out 3 colors that I'm kind of thinking for her dress. Even if I don't go with these colors for her dress, it'll still match enough that it'll be fine. So I've got kind of like a dark mid-tone and then light color. So I'm going to put the darker color, which is the goldenrod, kind of in the corner of her eyes here. So just the very corners. And then I'm just going to slowly work on fading this out, kind of up and over. I'm not going too dark. I'm using a slightly firmer pressure than I was with the skin. It's not burnished by any means because we're still going to go over with our skin tone to burnish it. But I want a good amount of pigment in there, so I'm just going to continuously layer it until we have a decent amount of pigment. That way it'll still be visible when we go over with our skin tones. Okay, so that was the goldenrod. Next is the yellow ochre. So I'm just going to carry on from where we ended with the goldenrod and then do the same thing. I'm going to kind of blend into the goldenrod, bring this over a little bit, fade it up, fade it over. When I say fade, I'm lightening my pressure gradually as I work over. I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter on this side because we don't have as much room on this eye as we do this one. So we need to kind of keep that in mind so we can fit all of the colors. And then lastly, I'm going to go in with the sunburst yellow and same thing, blend this into our mid-tone. I'm going to fade it out a little bit and fade it up into the skin. I'm just going to fade it out kind of along the same area that her eyelashes kind of end here. I'm going to bring it up a little bit more with this color. Just like that. And then her blush is relatively going to be the same thing. So with the blush, what I like to do is I base it on the eyes because, for example, we might not see the cheeks evenly. So you might notice more blush on one cheek than the other. Her face might be slightly turned or something. So I like to base it on the eyes because the eyes will be kind of like centered around the face. So with my darker color, and I usually only use 2 colors for blush, I'll use a dark color and a light color. So with the darkest one, we're going to go right into the corner here. Again, we're going to use like a light medium pressure, just slowly work this color in here. I like to bring this to about this side, the right side of the iris. Or I guess it'd be like the outside, depending on how you look. So the outside of the iris. So same here, I'd probably bring it to about here. And then I'll start fading it off. So we're just going to gradually lighten up that pressure. I like to keep it kind of like a circle, like a half circle, I suppose. Bring it down a little ways. So right about there is good. Then we'll start in on this side. We're going to do the same thing. Now her face is slightly turned to the left, so we're not going to see as much blush on this side of her face. So we're already lightening it. We see quite a bit more on this side. So we're just going to keep lightly building up that color as we go until we're happy with it, which I think there looks good. And then my lighter color for this skin tone is the hot pink. So kind of lightly going in where we started fading off with the mulberry, and I'm going to bring the hot pink in, and I'm going to bring that up to about the other side of her iris. Or sometimes if I want a lot of blush, I'll sometimes go up to, or sorry, pupil. Sometimes I'll go up to the outside of her iris, but usually the inside of her pupil is usually pretty good. And then we're just lightly fading that out, making sure it blends nicely into the skin as is already. And do the same thing on this side. Again, we don't have quite as much space to work with on this side. And there we go. So now we have her eye makeup and stuff, sorry. Now we can fully focus on the rest of her. So we are just going to go back in with our Parma Violet now. I'm going to attempt to sharpen mine up a little bit more to get rid of that unevenness of it. That's better. Still using that light pressure, I'm just going to come back in, add a little bit more to our shadows. Make sure they fade out nicely. We'll darken up some shadows, like this side of her head will be a little bit more in shadow because of the light coming in this way. You're always going to start gradually. You're not going to go in full force ever. You're going to start really light. You're going to start playing that shadow in there a little bit, gradually adding more if it's not looking quite right, and then stopping when it does, I suppose. I'm going to add a fair amount of the Parma Violet under her neck here, because like I said, it's going to be fairly shadowed. You'll notice I'm kind of like skipping over quickly in places, and that's because I don't really need to add a whole lot more. I'm more just adding more shadow color to the very edges just to accentuate that. It's driving me crazy when it's bumping. It's like making this ticking sound. I think this is just going to be a skin tutorial. I think what I'm going to do is I will still film the rest of it, but it will be in its own speed color. So otherwise these are just going to be a little bit too long. And then it gives me 2 videos for the price of 1. All right, so she's already looking a little bit more alive, but she's not looking the greatest yet. So we are gonna start fixing that. Now we're gonna start getting serious. So we're gonna go back in with our nectar. nice and sharp. We're going to go back in over that Parma Violet, same thing. Just neutralizing that purple. Little circles, fading out just a little bit. Okay, some of these fades look a little bit harsh, like here for example, so I'm just going to fade this out a little bit more. You basically want to make your fades look like they're fading into white. As long as they look like they're gradually fading into nothing, then it looks good. Sometimes you can get away with not fading it out that great if you're working in the same color family. So Skin is one that it doesn't have to fade out completely perfect, but at the same time, if you want that really smooth, flawless look, you want them to be as good as possible. I feel like it's just a lot of practice. Practice, definitely. So the face, we're going to be a little bit more careful on, but relatively we're doing the exact same thing. apologies. I had a Stitch at the door. If anybody's new to this channel, Stitch is my cat. He's now going to scrape at the water bowl because apparently it makes the water fresher when he does that. So don't mind him. Add a little bit more of a shadow here. We don't want this shadow to be too dark, but I'm just going to keep adding the shadow colors to it to kind of help blend it out a little bit. I want lots of highlights on her face, so I'm going to leave it just like that. Basically, our shadows are outlining her face. Your highlights are generally going to be around their foreheads, the inner cheeks, on top of the nose, usually like the bridge of the nose. You can definitely look up different pictures of like people, realistically, specifically models though, and the only reason I say that is because they're usually like photoshopped where you can really see the highlights and then you can kind of tell where you want them a little bit easier than you can on like natural skin, unless that's what you're going for. I just really like to accentuate the highlights on the girls because I feel like it just makes them look a little bit better, but again, it's just preference and however you want to color yours. So next we're gonna go in with our peach. And same thing, we're lightly going over our shadows and then fading this out a little bit. We'll try and save highlights when we can. I think for this arm, for my girl, it's gonna be mostly in shadows. So I'm not too worried about having really light highlights on this arm. So I think I'm mostly just gonna go over the shadows with the peach and then just put a layer of peach down for the highlights as well. And I'm just gonna keep using some circles to kind of really get that color in there. It's kind of the same for her neck. Hey, buddy. What you doing? Really? Hi. He's so cute. So kind of once we get past her neck, we can start leaving a little bit more for highlights. Pretty much wherever we can, we're going to save highlights. Okay, so now we're kind of saving our highlights here. We're just fading our peach into them. Fade a little bit of peach up closer up her nose on this side because we want the highlight to be at the very top here. Fade the peach out a little bit this way. Okay, I think that looks okay. I probably won't use the white for this skin tone. You could, if you wanted this skin to be really pale, you could just go over with a layer of the light peach and then go through and burnish everything with the white. That's definitely an option. I don't think I want her skin to be that pale. I'm not completely canceling that out yet, we'll see. But I think I'm gonna start burnishing with the light peach in the shadows at the very least. So I'm just gonna start in the shadows with kind of a medium firm pressure. My cat wants out, one sec. Okay, so kind of a medium firm pressure. I'm just using little circles. I'm gradually building up on that pressure. So I don't know if there's like a right or wrong way to do this. There's probably multiple different ways, but I find that using a lighter pressure and like gradually building it up helps move the pigment around and helps blend it a little bit smoother. That's just my theory, so that's how I do it. I'm gonna lighten up the pressure here because we don't have as many layers in these highlights. We actually only have one layer of the light peach and that's it. So I'm gonna kind of avoid those areas for now and kind of work from where we have the highlights or the shadows and such. I'm gonna bring this out from her eye makeup here. Just gonna lightly go over these highlighted areas. I'm gonna constantly get rid of the pigment that's kind of coming off, otherwise you might end up with like little random patches of darker pigment where you might not want it. So yeah, firmer pressure in the areas where we have put a lot of layers, and then I'm just gonna lighten it up and build up these layers in the highlight areas. So just lots and lots of layers here. My light peach is fairly short. It keeps wanting to try to escape from my pencil extender. Since Hannah doesn't close the eyes on the girls, what I like to do is kind of bring my lighter color in towards the part of her eye and then just lightly fade it out into the white of her eye and leave it like that. I don't close them or anything. I leave them how Hannah drew them, but I just like to fade the skin tone into the whites of the eyes, if that makes sense. Again, though, you can color them however you would like. Again, just lightly adding layers to the highlight areas. Apologies if you can hear that banging. Somebody is chipping away at the ice. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but it's somewhere close by. I actually wonder if it's the hubby maybe. No, not the hubby that I can see. One of the neighbors maybe. Okay, yeah, so I definitely think that if I use the whites on her face, it's going to be too light compared to the rest of her skin. So I didn't really burnish the highlighted areas here. I'm gonna go ahead and start working on burnishing them now. So I'm just gonna add a few more layers, gradually increasing my pressure. And just burnish them into the shadows that are already burnished. Just working at it pretty much until it looks smooth. All right, and that I think is her skin. It's a little bit patchy here. So I don't think I fully burnished that. Just gonna like pick out anywhere where it's still just slightly patchy that I might have missed. It's not too bad though. Unfortunately, it doesn't look super smooth on camera, and that is, I'm gonna blame just my camera, because to my eyes, she looks really smooth. Yeah, that is kind of what I would class as just like a basic Caucasian skin, a little bit more cool toned, more on the light side. She's not super pale, but she's also not super tan either, so yeah, just basic Caucasian skin is what I would probably class this as. That's how I would go about doing it. The colors I would use, the techniques I would use, you can apply them to any picture. Again, just experiment. The more you practice and the more you experiment, the better you'll get, the more knowledge you will get from practice. So definitely my recommendations. I'm going to make note to remember to bring her back finished in this video so you guys can see, and then I will have her available as a speed color at some point later on. Hey guys, it's me from the future. So this is the final product. This is how she turned out. I'm really happy with the Belle vibes I'm getting from her. She's a little bit more of like a sultry kind of adult version of Belle, I think, but I think she turned out really good. The camera is being pretty true to the colors aside from her hair. It does not look this streaky in real life, and it's actually a little bit darker than it's showing up on camera, but it's fairly close. I really love the hair on this page. It kind of gives me Dolly Parton vibes, so we can say that this is kind of Belle mixed with Dolly, which I think is very suiting. So yeah, there will be a speed color up for the entire coloring of her if you guys are interested. I'm not quite sure which order I'm releasing the videos, so make sure you go and subscribe if you're not already, and hit the bell if you want to be notified for when that video comes out, or just kind of keep checking back on the channel. But yeah, she is done. I'm real happy with her. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you found it informative and that it helped you a little bit. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys in one of my future videos. All right, everybody, take care. Bye.